Hi, Bother Brigade. Here's what's bothering me today. We should probably talk about Bill C-11 a little bit because it's trending on Twitter and it's currently in the Canadian Senate. And a bunch of people, predominantly right-wing, are very concerned about it. So let's actually talk a little bit and break down some of the main points and some valid arguments for and against Bill C-11, as well as some very crucial, massive misunderstandings about what is involved with this legislation. So, in broad strokes, Bill C-11 is supposed to, in theory anyway, be a bill that would allow the CRTC, which governs Canadian, broadcasting basically, it would enable them to apply penalties to people and publications, journalistic organizations, etc., who did not actually have enough Canadian content. This is basically kind of trying to expand the CRTC's existing mandate of you must have X amount of Canadian content on TV and on the radio waves. They're now just trying to push that into the digital sphere. So hypothetically, someone online would need to say have X amount of Canadian content on their online YouTube channels or on their news media programs, whatever it may be, their Substack, whatever. You have to have some people, at least one of the cameramen must be Canadian. That's kind of what they're trying to do. This would also mostly affect streaming services such as Netflix and Disney Plus, saying you must have X amount of Canadian content. How you achieve it, that's up to you, but there must be X amount. Broad strokes, that's what it is supposed to do. However, there is, of course, valid concern about what that means for individual creators. One of the chief architects of this bill is saying, oh, well, we've put in safeguards, but do you think he can name them off the top of his head? No, so that's kind of concerning. There was even a dismissive remark at one point said, we don't want to regulate your cat videos, which, oh boy, but anyway, it kind of just holds true to the point that these people don't exactly know what they're doing, even though it is ostensibly about just trying to give the CRTC more of a mandate in the new massive online digital sphere. It still doesn't mean it should 100% be trusted, but let's evaluate why a lot of people, particularly on the right, seem to be freaking out about it. So if you're still on the Bird site, as I am, you will see that there's a ton of people under the trending hashtag of Bill C-11 going on and on about, oh, this is like a communist country. They're going to try and tell you what you can and can't see. Now, again, based on what I mentioned just before, that kind of is clearly not actually going to be the case. But what it may affect is the fact that a lot of their preferred content that they consume comes from America. So that may result in some changes or some challenging times for those publications or Canadians trying to access those publications. And then there's another thing that I know I saw, and lots of people are also posting about it, where YouTube basically sent a push notification on your channel that is telling people about Bill C-11 and, oh, you should learn more. And so a bunch of people are saying, oh, see, even YouTube recognizes how draconian and terrible this is. No, not quite. YouTube cares about this because if they are forced to change the algorithm to support Canadian content, that doesn't make them as much money because, as any Canadian content creator on YouTube will tell you, it is a death sentence for your place in the algorithm. So that's part of why the government of Canada wants to try and change that so that more Canadian content would be seen. But a lot of right-wingers are freaking out about this and thinking it means, oh, it's totalitarian news organization, blah. They're freaking out about that and responding that way because it means that they may be given more views that they do not necessarily agree with. And it also means that YouTube is not in support of that because that doesn't make them money via clicks and whatnot. Remember, we are operating under a capitalist system. YouTube's primary motivation is to make money off of ads. So that's their main concern. And since unfortunately Canadian content doesn't generate clicks, that's a loss in revenue for them. That is the reason why YouTube cares about this. It's not that they actually care about Canadian media and content and broadcasting standards. So I know at the top of this, I also mentioned that there were fines that would be involved because they're changing, because before what happened was the CRTC used to have a 7-year broadcast licensing period. This bill is removing that and replacing it instead with kind of like, I guess you could call it a broad mandate that means you have to meet certain requirements and checklists, otherwise you're subject to fines and penalties until you change that. That's their attempt at modernizing this old beastly institution. And that, crucially, is another big part of why people on the right wing are freaking out about it. Because, oh, geez, you mean I need to do more Canadian content? Well, that's going to penalize me because I won't get as much clicks in my place in the algorithm. Or, oh, geez, you mean I have to actually hire Canadians as a Canadian programming set? Like, oh geez. And I know they said that, this won't affect individual online creators, but let's be real here. It's a government under a neoliberal nightmare capitalist system, so I'm not exactly going to think, oh yeah, I totally trust these guys on this. But that is what's causing another huge element of concern amongst conservatives and the far right, etc. Because, well, oh, hey, no, we may suddenly be fined for spreading misinformation or by not adhering to Canadian broadcasting standards, and that could financially ruin us, so we can't do that. And that's kind of really what it is. It's not really about freedom, because one would think and assume as a rational functioning human that, oh hey, if I'm a Canadian content creator, then maybe, having a system where my stuff is shown to more people, including my fellow Canadians, that's probably a good thing. But we don't live in a sane, rational world anymore, so forget I even said that, unfortunately. So again, the bill on its surface is meant to try and promote more Canadian content, especially French language and Indigenous language content, which is why certain groups very much support the passing of this bill. A lot of people on the right, however, are freaking out, thinking that it's all about censorship. And again, my inner leftist is telling me, yeah, they kind of aren't entirely wrong to an extent, but how they're understanding this is clearly way over the top and borderline conspiratorial. And even the whole YouTube thing, it's more about YouTube potentially losing money because, again, via the algorithm, Canadian content doesn't actually sell that much, which is why it's not promoted. And so if you actually want to see more Canadian content, that's not a bad thing to try and force it to do so. But a lot of people are interpreting that as, oh, the government is trying to control what I see. And it's like, yeah, dude, that already happens on TV and radio. Hell, look at this channel, right? We're a leftist channel doing really weird scuffed shit here. So yeah, how would it feel to not have my content promoted to places? Because I'm not always doing stuff that's necessarily fruitful to the algorithm, that therefore makes money for YouTube, a corporation that doesn't care about me insofar as my potential revenue. I wonder how that would feel. The whole situation is just so ridiculously absurd and borderline obscene. It's still not exactly a great situation. This legislation can and should be better. I'm not exactly expecting good stuff from this terrible, awful liberal government, right? But on the other hand, this isn't, mass censorship and we're gonna be like North Korea with controlled state media. It's like, it's the same people who say CBC is state media. And I'm like, yeah, kind of, because the CBC doesn't actually do solid left-wing journalism. They never really did. It should kind of tell you everything that the people most freaking out about this are the people who have profited so much off of the status quo, which is already monstrously unfair and in many ways bigoted in its discrimination against Canadian content, especially by any Canadians who are minorities, whether those are linguistic or ethnic minorities in this country. More Canadian eyes watching more Canadian content is, on a surface level, not bad, and anyone trying to tell you otherwise is being disingenuous and they have something to hide. And the fact that that's not part of the conversation is definitely what's bothering me today.